Okay, so today we're going to talk about the RMS Titanic, which sinks in April of 1912. Some people don't know, by the way, but that front smokestack is sort of just for show. It doesn't emit any smoke, but it was more or less used for ventilation. Also, if you want to go into stuff that foreshadows the sinking of the Titanic, you can talk about the book The Titan, which is published a handful of years before the Titanic and talks about a ship sinking, many people perishing. Also, if you want to go further than that, during the construction of the Titanic, 8 people do pass away. So this is one of a handful of last known photos of the Titanic. Regardless, they're all pretty eerie. You can look up and decide for yourself. Whichever is the last known photo, the Titanic will end up sinking 3 days later. The story behind this photo, though, comes from a guy that was on the Titanic during part of its voyage and then gets off the Titanic because he had been called in for work. I believe he was a priest, so kind of eerie, but luckily for him, he got off. You also can search the iceberg that sank the Titanic. You'll get this photo and a handful of others. Now, ships that had been in the area after the sinking claimed to see icebergs with red streaks on them, implying that that was the red paint from the Titanic, so a handful of photos do get snapped. There's not 100% proof whether it was just the only iceberg in the area or if they really did see this red paint, but I'll let you decide for yourself. These are the binoculars that should have been used the night the Titanic hit the iceberg. Problem is, they were locked away in a box, nobody knew where the key was, so lookouts relied on just eyesight alone. The Titanic, for what it's worth, also just ignored a handful of distress calls claiming that there was ice in the area. The Californian is one of the biggest what-ifs regarding the Titanic. Stanley Lord, the captain of the Californian, has his ship stop moving the night of April 12th due to the ice in the area. He actually has his radio operator send out warnings to the ships in the area talking about the ice, which the Titanic apparently ignores. The Californian's radio operators will then turn off their radio and go to sleep. When Stanley Lord that night is awoken due to the signal flares, he claims that they're just fireworks. The Californian, being about 20 miles or so from the Titanic, could have saved a lot of the passengers that were in the water. That being said, the Californian has kind of a sad fate of its own, being sunk by a torpedo from a U-boat during World War I. Just a fun fact, this is the actual violin, which is privately owned now, by the way, and is from the band that famously plays as the ship is sinking. Also, first-class passengers had a much higher survival rating. Their rooms look like this. It should be mentioned that the 700 third-class passengers shared 2 bathrooms and had a much higher mortality rate during the sinking. The Titanic's lifeboats will forever be a story as a part of the Titanic. Now, they did have enough to pass inspections, though the lifeboats weren't nearly enough to hold all of the passengers on the Titanic. What some people don't know is many of the lifeboats go off pretty much just half full, and the first lifeboat doesn't even go off until an hour or so after the Titanic is sinking. Also, third-class passengers were told to stay put, so a lot of them don't get on the lifeboats, hence why a lot of them perished. Anyways, I'm running out of time. Hopefully you learned something. Love you all.